Good morning. Welcome once again. Thank you all so much for joining today's analyst webinar. We have Howard Dresner from Dresner Advisory Services live with us today, and Porter from IBI, and myself. And we are very excited to talk to you guys about the exciting topic of supercharging your enterprise applications. We have some exciting ground to cover today, but before we jump in, just wanted to share a couple of quick IBI updates. As many, hopefully all of you have seen by now, WebFOCUS 9.3 was recently released. We have a great blog on our website from Vice President of the IBI portfolio, Vijay Raman, that you can read. Check it out on ibi.com. I'll drop the link in the chat shortly and you can see it there. If you are ready to get your hands on a WebFOCUS 9.3 environment, go ahead and register for one of our Summit Roadshow events on ibi.com/events. Our next stop is actually next week in Arlington. Registration has officially closed on our website, but I do have a couple of spots available left. And if you are in the Arlington area and you are dying to come, go ahead and send me a message and I will try to get your name on that list. If you can get it to me by 5 o'clock end of day today. We also have 2 more stops later this year in Chicago and New York City. It's going to be a really exciting day full of hands-on training, product-led breakout sessions, and networking with other IBI users. Our first event in Boston was a hit. We had such a great time getting to connect with all of you who were there. Porter was there. He did a great job presenting on what's new with AI and DSML and WebFOCUS, and running hands-on labs in WebFOCUS Designer. So go ahead, head to our website, register for one of those events. You don't want to miss it. These are really exciting full-day events that we're offering this year. You can find all of this information on our website at ibi.com. If you haven't already seen that new website, go and check it out today. We also have launched a new community where you can connect with different people in the IBI organization and with other IBI users across the world. We have over 10,000 posts in this new community. It's extremely active. We've brought information over from the last IBI community, but there's also plenty of new content, and you can get those questions that you have about your deployment answered by IBI experts and other, both within IBI and outside of the organization. So definitely go to community.ibi.com, register if you don't already have an account, and we will see you there. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our 2 speakers for today. We have Howard Dresner, Chief Research Officer from Dresner Advisory Services. Howard is one of the foremost thought leaders in business intelligence and performance management, having coined the term business intelligence in 1989. He has published 2 books on the subject: The Performance Management Revolution, Business Results Through Insight and Action, and Profiles in Performance, Business Intelligence Journeys and the Roadmap for Change. He lectures at forums around the world and is often cited by the business and trade press. Prior to Dresner Advisory Services, Howard served as Chief Strategy Officer at Hyperion Solutions and was a research fellow at Gartner, where he led its business intelligence research practice for 13 years. Then also on today's session, we have Porter Thorndike, who's a principal product manager at Cloud Software Group in the IBI business unit. Porter has over 24 years of experience in the data and analytics market, holding roles that span sales, marketing, engineering, and product management. One of Porter's specialties is his knowledge of technology market trends that helps him guide the product roadmap as well as inform customers of how to best maximize their investment in IBI solutions. So thank you so much, Howard and Porter, for joining us today. As a quick housekeeping reminder, the chat is closed, but any questions that you have, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A field, and I'll be moderating that Q&A chat today. And then after the session closes, you'll be guided to a survey. Please take the chance to fill it out. We definitely appreciate your feedback on the sessions today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Porter. Thanks, you guys.
Anna. Yep, great to be here always with our amazing customers. You know, it's always exciting time for me when we have a new release. Someone that's been at IBI for a long time, started as a sales engineer, someone that loves technology. It's like a new toy. It's Christmas, new releases, new features. I love it. I get excited about it. And when we have a big new release, there's a lot of things that happen, right? Like we had a full-on user group that's very product focused. And we always want to do sessions like this as well that try to contextualize, like, why did we produce this release? What does it mean for our customers? What's the bigger picture? And so we'd love to have sessions like this where we can pull in an expert like Howard who can speak to broader market trends in our market and beyond just IBI. And I always feel that this is a good time to share with customers, not only what I'm seeing in the market, but really how we're seeing customers use the product and the context of what that release can mean to how they can use it. And I love to think into the future, and share with customers how they can do that. So we thought really a good topic is how to supercharge your enterprise applications, because the reality is all of you are using IBI software to create these really large, sturdy, mission critical reporting and dashboarding applications. We want to share with you how you can maybe take them to the next level using this release. So, I think that this really maps to how you can do this, really maps to our priorities. We're heavily focused on our customers. One of the things that means is sometimes supercharging your application means making life better for the creators, the application and report developers. So it's certainly been a heavy focus of ours, how we can take things that used to have been done in the code and make them more graphical. Sometimes it means just deploying it in a more flexible way where you can benefit from auto scaling with the cloud. Sometimes this is taking advantage of new interactive capabilities that really maybe benefit the end consumer, things like interactivity, whether that be, drill down or brush linking or things like that, or, leveraging additional sources of data, maybe from the mainframe. We see a lot of DSML use cases in financial services and others for that, or embedding, data science and machine learning, or thinking about what maybe new user experiences might be for these people. So, as I, think back to customers that I've supported, and the key use cases that we support, we're very big in creating things like reporting and dashboarding, portal applications, very successful for our customers. This is one that I created years ago, and it looks amazing. I agree. It was great. Some of the problems I encountered and our customers encountered, though, is that it may have been difficult to build it, like to build the map. I'm in App Studio. It's multiple map layers. I'm dropping into the code, the parameters, all of these containers. It's not working on mobile devices, right? There's some of the challenges that I and we had creating content like this, or creating pixel perfect documents and reports, or in a document canvas, and it took longer than we would have liked. I always felt the end result was something great, but that maybe the creation experience took longer than it should or needed to, or creating highly parameter-driven applications. This is one that I created. The underlying report, it's 1 billion parameters. I'm into the code to, support the creation of the double-handled slider or the variable metric selection. Or we want progressive disclosure. I want to collect C results and take it here. That's JavaScript. Hey, we got it done at the end of the day. And the result was great. But one of the things we want to do is really, with this release and over the past couple of releases, improve life for the creators. Make this graphical. Make it no code. Allow you to do it faster and easier. Okay. And the other thing that we've supported for a long time is embedded BI. And I think we're strong in this area. One thing we heard from customers is they have a subset of customers that may have wanted to provide things like web-based ad hoc reporting or data visualization via InfoAssist or App Studio, or expose some of our other tools. So one thing that I found personally is trying to white label parts of the tools, the menus and the icons. Very difficult as well. These are challenges many of you may have experienced over the years. And so, a heavy focus really has been on how can we make life better for the creators. Here's just a subset of some of my favorite things that were added in the last 5 releases, really to take the entire experience for application report developers, from App Studio or Info Assistant into the designer. Really everything that you need to do or can do, we have brought in, highlighted by some big ones in 9.3, like graphical portal design, modernized report caster, opening legacy content from IA and designer as well. So, I think we're always thinking about you, all you creators out there, how we can make life better for you as well. Here's one of them in 9.2, right? Like, do you want to expose WebFOCUS Designer or the WebFOCUS Hub within your application, but you don't want it to look like IBI or WebFOCUS? This is one of my favorite new capabilities that really improves the life of anyone looking to embed the solution. Another thing is the designer. Look at kind of everything that can be done with the designer. Like, are you someone that wants to explore the data and visualize the data? Designer is the tool for you. Are you someone that needs to create those multi-page pixel perfect documents? Also, the tool for you with the same look and user experience. Do you need to drive in and create those multi-layer maps? Or are you an application developer? You're pulling content together. There's lots of parameters. It's being, populated from here. It needs to chain in this direction. Navigation, interactions, what happens when I click here? Also the tool for you, in addition to things like creation of the portals. So controlling the menus, the navigation, and the security. Really, I think the designer's at the point where, we don't see any reason really to use any of those legacy solutions anymore. Here's a quick screenshot of the portal editor. It was introduced in 9.3. It's like insanely easy to rapidly create a portal that's branded in a certain way and has the navigation that you want, multi-level, where you want it, what is exposed, what's shown, how does it look, following just that same user experience that we see throughout the designer. Here's the modernized report caster, okay? We know many of you are using this. So to burst and distribute, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of slices of reports or documents to people, much better experience for someone that needs to use that. And we also see potentially end consumers being able to benefit from the modernized report caster via something like a subscribed option within a portal as well. This is one of my favorite ones, the machine learning functions, knowing that a lot of our customers in the past may have relied on outside data science solutions or technologies, Python, Jupyter Notebooks, Data Robot, to name a few. And to deploy data science at scale, I think we're very excited that we can actually now offer graphical, no-code model training and deployment all within the workflow of connected data, transform data, train it, deploy it, and then create the reports and dashboards that the results may show up in as well. And so, as we look at how our portal application's evolving, we're actually seeing a lot of people start to leverage visualizations in here as well. Commonly, known dashboards and visualizations or advanced ones. This is it's kind of a spectral heat map of a visual depiction of a warehouse that one of our customers uses, all but still with that kind of like highly parameter driven experience. We're seeing people pushing the envelope on things like branding and theming. It's a good example of like a dark themed type portal application or dashboard. We're seeing people make it kind of more graphical or visual. Here's another one that might just be more kind of visual depictions of the information, almost like kind of like a little mini data story, if you will, where we're kind of like communicating something that is important in a high level, like an investor at risk of churn or a position of interest, and there's tiles, and maybe you click into the tiles and it loads up another screen, and that these are responsive web design ready to go out of the box. You view this on your phone, it's like maybe a vertical, column of tiles as well. So we see a lot of people doing that, and we think about how can we benefit end consumers. To me, it's, how can it be more interactive? How can it be more visual? Does it work on my phone or my tablet? Can I do everything there? Can I do more myself? Can I subscribe to alerts? Can I schedule it myself? What about new experiences we might want to offer them, like natural language query? So we've got reports and dashboards. I've got another question, but I'm not technical. Can I type it and get the answer? How about what should I know about that is not in a pre-built report or dashboard that I don't know to ask the question? That's where machine-generated data stories are great as well. So just a couple quick looks on where we see kind of life improving and going for consumers. It is that reportcaster experience where you maybe are getting an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF report. In the past, we see a lot of interest in things like e-statements, where this can be distributed and there's data embedded and it retains interactivity, or more visual depictions. I use Strava. It's kind of this activity and exercise tracking app. And every month I get an infographic of my activity. So we see a lot of interest in people, and really from just the market and consumers wanting more visual depictions of their information. So these are some formats we see a lot of interest in customers taking advantage of. Here is the natural language query as of 9.3 that can be embedded into an existing dashboard, right? It doesn't have to be its own thing. It can live. No one's going to take away your reports and dashboards, right? What if we could just add this capability to your existing report and dashboard application? And the last slide that I have before handing it over, machine generated data stories. Again, what if this could just be added as a page within your existing portal to tell you about signals in the data, things that are happening that we believe are important to you based on the data you're already consuming, reports that you're using as well. So, to me, exciting. I think you can look at enterprise reporting and dashboarding and say, oh, that's old technology. It's not old technology, and I think that the potential to supercharge these applications really for creators and consumers by infusing some of these new things and experiences and technologies really can deliver a lot of value to your existing applications as well. So let me hand it off now to Howard Dresner. I could just bathe you in compliments. Hannah already did that. The one thing she may have forgotten, I just have to mention, is Howard was named like a distinguished analyst or a fellow or something. I'm wondering if there was like a sword involved in this process or something. Anyway, Howard, thanks so much for being with us. Always interesting to hear what you're hearing from the broader marketplace.
Thanks, Porter. Appreciate it. Now I had to pull the sword out of the stone. That was that's the ritual. But thanks for that introduction, both of you. Appreciate it. Really glad to be here today to share some stories with all of you. And our stories are always based on data. We always bring data to the conversation. So Dresner Advisory Services, those of you know us, we are a primary research organization. And when we were little kids, at school, we would play with, pails and buckets of sand and stuff like that. But these days, as grown-ups, we play with data. And we are a bunch of data people. We love to get immersed in our data. We've been doing this for 17 years now with Dresner Advisory Services, and we publish innumerable market reports. We collect lots and lots of data. We've been doing that for lots of years. We always bring data to the conversation. I'm going to share some of that with you. Those that are interested in learning more about becoming one of our data leaders, by the way, the URL is right there on the page. But I'm going to share some concepts too today, and very much that align with some of the things that Porter was talking about. So we go to the next slide. One of the concepts I want to share with you is something that I call information democracy. And I started using this term 31 years ago. I can't say that I coined this one. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, right? Probably other people talked about information democracy, but it's this notion that everyone, all the stakeholders need to have access to timely, useful, relevant insights that are actionable. How do we do that? And we've been making some progress against this, right? But it's been slow progress. So do all the stakeholders have access to timely, relevant insights? Well, probably not, but we've definitely been making some progress over the last 30 years. So that's one really important concept. And to support this notion of information democracy, we track a whole host of different technologies out there, 63 of them this year. You don't have to read this chart. There are a lot of them. Some of them are really, really important. We're only going to focus on 4 of them. So you look at the next slide, you can see the 4 that we're going to talk about for today. We're going to talk about cloud. All right, everybody talks about cloud. Everybody knows about cloud. So that's important. End user self-service, which Porter referenced. Definitely AI, data science, and machine learning, and also embedded BI, which Porter also talked about. So we're going to focus on those. Those are really important. And we go to the next slide. You can see I have this notion of information democracy being supported by these 3 major pillars. So cloud, certainly. We're going to start off talking about cloud. Then we're going to talk about self-service. We'll talk about embedded business intelligence, and you see my little flying saucer up there on the right. We'll talk about artificial intelligence and data science and machine learning too, because that's really important too to take us forward into the future. So let's start and talk about cloud on the next slide. And cloud's not one thing. It's a platform. It's a delivery mechanism. The concept's been around for a really long time. And you can see that there are three dominant models, if you will. This private cloud, which is sort of the single tenant approach. Basically, it's more of a traditional model, except the application's on someone else's server and you sort of tunnel through a virtual private network to get to it. There's a lot of that going on out there today. I wouldn't say it's the dominant model, but it's prominent. Then I'll go all the way to the right, there's the public cloud model, which most people are very familiar with. Most of us do live within SaaS applications. We certainly do. A lot of our work is done in SaaS applications today, and that's where you see things like multi-tenant, you see containerization, microservices, and then a million of hybrid. So hybrid is where you're really taking the best of all worlds, so both the private and the public, and sort of combining that together to put those applications and those data where they are best suited to be. But public has obviously gotten lots of attention, and that's really the dominant or the growing model in the marketplace, where it is much more of a multi-user, multi-tenant environment that we're looking at. So let's go to the next slide. Let's look at the importance. So we've been tracking this notion of cloud, well, for a really, really long time, as you can see, going back to 2012, just asking, first of all, what's the importance of this cloud thing? And you can see, going all the way back to 2012, well, not so important to organizations to where we are today. These are the user organizations, by the way, where it's pretty important. So you can see on a weighted mean basis, it's at a 4.0, which is very important. So you can see this has become increasingly important. You can see sort of an inflection point around 2018 that this is a really hot topic, and it's no surprise. Everybody's using cloud today. That was not the case, clearly, going back to 2012. If we go to the next slide, we can take a look at, and this is, by the way, one of my favorite charts, right? Just taking a look. Once again, when you got lots of data, right, flaunt it. We have lots of data then, and we have very much a historical perspective on the marketplace, which is pretty cool. So if you look at plans for public cloud business intelligence, going back to 2012, you got all these people basically saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. That makes no sense whatsoever. We're going to stay on-prem forever. Well, through education and through maturation of the technology, you can see that eventually those lines crossed. And so back in 2023, the lines crossed where you actually see more using today than people saying they have no plans, which is pretty exciting. So it's definitely mainstream. So what's exciting on the next slide, as you can see, if you look at it from the industry perspective, in other words, the vendors, right, the suppliers of the technology, and the suppliers are always a bit ahead of the users. Not surprisingly, you can see this has really been critically important for the vendors. Now, that's important to you, and that's true of any new technology, by the way. The vendors or the suppliers are always ahead of the users. That's valuable for you because that means when you are ready, the technology is going to be there to actually support you. So that's actually a really good thing. And then the next slide, I just want to take a look at, and if you are an on-prem sort of customer, that's okay. The technology is still going to be there. What this chart actually shows is that for the most part, if you're looking for certain functionality, it's going to be available on the cloud. And many vendors and many suppliers are taking a cloud-first approach to development technology. And you can see that that's actually over the years, and this is just right now, over the years, it's expanded. So you see a lot more of the functionality is supported in the cloud and a little bit less so for the on-prem implementations. So you can definitely find it on the cloud. It's going to be less likely to find it on-prem over time, but it is still available from a number of suppliers. Now let's go to the last slide for cloud. And just looking at cloud advantages and disadvantages. Once again, we asked the users a whole host of questions, and this is one of them. Just asking, what are the pros and the cons of implementing a cloud-based solution and specifically cloud business intelligence or analytics? And you can see, for the most part, everything is an advantage. Even if you get down to the bottom of the chart, you can see some of the customization and the cost issues, security, privacy, but still over 50% are saying that even those things are actually an advantage. Now, when you look at the cost and the ROI issues, it really very much depends on the licensing model. And there have been some, especially in the infrastructure side, some of the databases where you've been, paying by the drink, basically. And so sometimes you get some of those, surprising non-budgeted items. And that's really what's dragged that down a little bit. For the most part, though, cloud is a net positive. Now, why is cloud important as it relates to information democracy? Well, because it makes the applications and the data and the insights so much more readily available. It's faster. There's elasticity associated with the cloud, so you can add resources much more quickly. And in addition to that, in most cases, it actually does bring the cost down. And cost has really been a big issue if we want to democratize these insights and this information. So we have to make it really easy to implement. We have to make it very available to folks and reliable. And we have to drop the cost down if we really want to achieve that penetration of the number of users and start delivering on the promise of information democracy. Okay, so now let's go to the next pillar. Let's talk about self-service business intelligence. And we've been talking about this for a while, and self-service is a lot of things, right? It's around, as Porter was saying, it's about allowing users to do more for themselves. So collaboration is part of that. Obviously, the usability is part of that. Being able to create and share those insights is important, but we have to do it in a governed environment. And so that's what when we talk about self-service, that's a big part of it. If we go to the next slide, so some people, when they talk about self-service, they think about the Wild West, right? So you can do whatever you want. The users are free to use whatever tool they want, bring in whatever data they want. So that's one sort of perception of what self-service is. On the right, you have a different perception of what self-service is, which is the Borg, right? You do it our way, and it's, you have very little flexibility to do anything that is individual in nature whatsoever. Is it either of these? Is it both of these? Well, the answer is it's neither one of these, right? If you do it the way that I'm thinking about self-service. So you go to the next slide, you can see really it's kind of a team sport. There are different roles, and I've highlighted some of the words here as it relates to self-service. So it's about creating, it's about sharing, it's about a managed environment, and it's about consistency. That's really key. So you've got designers, you've got data stewards that are responsible. You have administrators, and then you have users. So it's a team sport. It's about all of us working collectively together to make sure that we're supporting the enterprise with those timely and actionable and relevant insights so that we can do a better job in aligning everybody with the mission of the enterprise and also being able to execute quickly, make decisions more quickly, make better decisions more quickly. That's really what self-service is all about, and not having to go back to IT to ask for reports. So the users can do more for themselves in this very manageable and consistent environment. So let's take a look at the next slide. And, I like to talk about data literacy because, well, it's super important, right? Having some fluency with the data, understanding data relationships, how we can manipulate that data, make decisions based on that data. And a lot of people talk about, well, how do we train people? And training is certainly really important, right? We do want to train people, but it's not always possible. People are really busy, and to be able to allocate time to get trained sometimes isn't really easy. And if you look at data literacy within our community, the folks that we surveyed, you can see that only 24% said that the population have high data literacy. And if you look to the right, you can see that most organizations aren't planning or don't have a plan to train people in their organization. So how do we increase data literacy in those organizations? Well, the answer is self-service. That's one of the answers. If you put the data in their hands, increasingly, they will become more fluent and more comfortable with that data. And then, sure, you should augment with some degree of training. That's really important too, but we can't rely wholly on training. We want to make sure that we actually are giving them access to the tools, to the insights, to the data in a manageable way so that they can become more comfortable with it. And then when we augment it with training, of course, then they become even more fluent. But at least then at some point they have some context to apply that training that you're giving them instead of just going in cold and not having any familiarity with it. So next slide, let's take a look at just the importance of self-service over the course of the last 8 years. Once again, we have this historical data-based approach, and you can see that it's been pretty consistent. I mean, it's pretty much tracking above average since 2017. And the majority, 55%, are saying that it's either critical or very important. So we know that this is a really important thing, and this is something that organizations ought to be focused on. And then if we look at the next slide, just in terms of the success that organizations have. And there are two things to look at here. On the left, our pie chart here shows us that organizations are at least moderately successful. So those that are doing it are moderately successful with self-service BI. 22% are very successful. But what I want to share with you and what I want to amplify on the right here is that organizations that are very successful with business intelligence are also very successful in delivering self-service. And you could look at it the other way too. So if we're successful with self-service, we're going to be much more successful overall delivering business intelligence to the enterprise. So they go hand in glove. This is an important tool that organizations have to deliver business intelligence and these really valuable and relevant insights to the organization more broadly than you might be able to do otherwise. Okay, so how do organizations, so we say that, organizations want to share these insights, create and share these insights. On the next slide, how do they do that today? And this has changed, by the way, over time. All right, so during the pandemic, remember the pandemic? It was not a fun time, 4 years or so when we were living through that. And we weren't doing a lot of, face-to-face meetings. Of course, that's come back a little bit. Email has always been at the top of the list. People want to share insights via email. My problem with email, and we all do a lot of email, boy, that's the bane of my existence, right? Hundreds of emails every day. We got to go through them. And I'm constantly context switching. So like I have an email about this thing. All right, I got to change my, perspective for a moment and deal with that email. And then I get a different email about a completely different subject. That's the challenge with sharing these insights via email. We're still going to do it. That's okay. My personal belief is we want to keep it within our collaborative environment, our business intelligence environment, because that keeps it in context. So if we're creating and sharing insights and we may be annotating those and talking about those with our team members, if we keep it in the business intelligence environment, it stays in context. We can go back, we can audit that, we can understand the decisioning process that we actually went through. And so that's a really valuable thing to do. I know these other things will continue to be important too, but increasingly using the collaborative capabilities within our BI environment and our analytical environment has increased in importance. And obviously we like to see that because we see that as a way of accelerating the decision-making process and actually making better sort of collaborative decisions within the organization. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. I want to talk about another aspect of self-service, and that's what we call guided analytics. And this is really where we're creating as Porter talked about, this notion of creating stories and story flow. And this is where we do have the notion of designers and consumers. It's very pronounced there and it's really important. But the point is, this is a way to deliver this notion of these insights, these data-driven insights more broadly in the organization to folks who may not be super sophisticated. And many of you may be designers, some of you may be the consumers, and you certainly know what I'm talking about. But this is something, this notion of guided analytics is certainly important, and it's growing in importance in organizations. And I think it's, once again, another really valuable tool that organizations have to promote deeper penetration within the user base of these data-driven insights. So let's go to the next slide and talk about, well, what does that actually mean? Well, these are the authoring environments. You can think of the authoring environments, and I won't go through all of these, right? These are what the authors want from a guided analytics environment. You could think of them as artists, if you will, right? And so an artist has different paints and different solvents and different brushes, and of course the canvas, and then of course their technique that they use. And guided analytics is sort of like that too. You know, the designers are the artists, they're the painters, they're going to be designing these environments for their users, but these users are going to interact with them. It's going to be highly dynamic. We're not talking about a static environment. We're talking about something that's highly interactive, that's actually working with the data and helping the users go through this process. If we go to the next slide, you can see the user environment and what the users are looking for. All right, the users are connected to the data, but they're following the story flow. And as they become more sophisticated, they can interact with it even more so. So they can play it, they can stop it, they can reverse it, go backwards. They can interact with the objects, the analytical objects, or they can just watch the story go along with all the annotations, with the various graphics that may be included, maybe even videos that may be included in this. And so it makes it for the user a very accessible format, very usable. It steps them through the process. And going back to the comment I made earlier about data literacy, this helps somebody who is a less sophisticated user become much more data literate than they could be otherwise using a report or some other technique. So it's, once again, it's another really valuable tool that's part of self-service that helps promote this notion of information democracy that we talked about. Okay, new concept. Let's move on to the next slide and talk about embedded business intelligence. We've had an embedded BI market study report, oh gosh, I think for about 12 years now. We think it's really important. It's this notion of taking business intelligence and embedding it alongside some other application, and actually having it not just coexist, but actually be able to interact and share data back and forth between some sort of an application. It could be ERP, could be CRM, some other application, where that user spends most of their time in that other app, but they need this capability. In fact, with embedded BI, they're actually engaging with the data and using business intelligence and analytics without even really necessarily knowing that that's in fact what they're doing, which is really cool. And that's, once again, another way of driving towards this notion of information democracy. How do we get this notion of these data-driven insights, these really valuable insights, which help align us with the enterprise? If I'm not a BI user, if I'm an application user, well, embedded is the way that we do that. If we go to the next slide, once again, lots of data, because we are a bunch of data people and we love our data. We can see the importance of embedded BI since 2013. And so you can see it's actually on the uptick again. It's in the range of important to headed towards very important in terms of a trend. Once again, we had sort of an inflection point back in 2018, leveled off a little bit, but it seems to be growing again. And I see this once again as another really important tool for organizations if they want to really deliver on this notion and promise of information democracy. So let's take a look at the next slide and take a look at some of the objectives for BI. And what's really interesting is that most organizations want to use embedded BI to improve self-service. Yay, that's exactly right. And there are other uses too, and other use cases. Sure, sometimes we want to provide it to our customers. In some instances, folks actually use embedded to deliver a paid-for service to some of their customers. But for the most part, organizations want to use it to expand access, to deliver those insights to more users than they ordinarily would be able to do if they did not use embedded capabilities. So on the next slide, we take a look at sort of adoption. Here, just looking at 5 years of data. I know it's a little disappointing, right? Coming down from 12 or 13 years worth of data, but 5 years worth of data, you can see that we saw an uptick in terms of the adoption. More folks are actually using it. Almost 50% of our surveyed organizations are doing something with embedded business intelligence, which is good. So they've gotten to a degree of sophistication and comfort level where they feel like not only can they deliver other forms of or other paradigms of business intelligence, but they can also add embedded to further penetrate usage and deliver BI, business intelligence, to more stakeholders and more user constituents than they could otherwise. So last slide on embedded, next one here, just looking at what's notable here is the notion of embedded has really changed, right? So a really long time ago, over 10 years ago, when we first started looking at embedded, it was mostly static stuff. You know, how do we deliver static reports alongside something else? Well, it's become much more interactive, where users are looking for, you know, the ability to actually interact with that data and be able to, you know, actually have it interact with the data in their application. So it's become much more dynamic in nature, but also the integration has become much more lightweight than it has before. So things like iframes for instance, have become much more popular. So we're not, and we're not actually compiling it in other code necessarily. It's a much more lightweight interface than it would have been ordinarily. So that's the whole discussion around embedded. Now I want to introduce a whole new topic and a whole new concept to you folks, talking about the future. And so many of you have heard about, or you're striving to become a digital enterprise. What does that mean? Well, we have a concept we call being hyper-decisive, which is almost synonymous with digital enterprise, but it's really very much about the data. How do we as enterprises take in all of the available data? And my God, there's so much data out there today, that is on-prem, that is in the cloud, that is streaming. It's crazy, right? But we want to be able to bring in all this data to build perspective. How do we do that? And that's what we call being hyper-decisive, being able to take all of the relevant data to build that perspective as quickly as possible and be able to execute on that. So you can see my little graphic here, more data, more decisions, faster execution. That's really important to us. And so organizations, while you might not be there today, that's okay. That should be a goal for you. You should try to track towards that, make progress towards becoming hyper-decisive within your organization. And you can see on the next graphic, on the next slide, we sort of have a simple model for this, and you can figure out where you are based on your particular organization, your particular industry. Where are you in the continuum, if you will, of moving towards being hyper-decisive? You can see some of the benefits of being hyper-decisive in the box on the upper right there, right? Dynamic, deep insight, common understanding, right? The world's moving fast, data's moving fast. You have to become a digital enterprise. And not that that's easy to do, right? But you have to have the goal to become a digital enterprise. And the way that you do that is by, becoming more hyper-decisive. How do you do that? Well, one way that you have to do that is you got to automate more. So you have to go, if you go to the next slide, you can see we have to use things like AI and data science and machine learning. And we're not replacing people with this stuff, trust me. But also when we talk about these things, and everything sort of gets conflated into AI now. We don't even know what we're talking about. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and everyone's talking about AI this and AI that, and most folks don't really understand the complexity and the variety of what's associated with it. So I created this little, word cloud here to show you there's a lot built in there. Obviously, descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, neural networks, genetic algorithms. There's a lot. And so you really need to educate yourself on what all this stuff is. So when somebody says AI, you should say, well, what do you mean by AI? And by the way, that's a misnomer too. Artificial intelligence, it's not intelligent. Really what we're talking about are just really complex and sophisticated mathematical models and algorithms, right? It's not magic. They're not self-aware. The robots aren't coming to take over. But these are really useful tools for us as we want to move towards being hyper-decisive. We have to automate more if we want to take advantage of all that data and deliver it to as many users as possible and be able to execute on that. So let's go to the next slide and talk about, AI supported use cases. What do we want to do with AI? And we use AI all the time, by the way. We use generative AI. We have a generative AI chatbot into our corpus of research. Super cool, helps us do things that we could not do otherwise. And so really what organizations want to do is severalfold. First of all, they want to do superhuman things. What are things that humans can't do? Well, things like anomaly detection, right? And we all know this, like fraud detection. We've been doing that for years in banking, right? Many of you get alerted from your credit card company or something like that when they see some unusual behavior. They're using neural networks to do that. And so that's one of the great things about using AI. It can do things, and you can build these very complex models with many, many parameters built into them that we couldn't use with other technologies, or we couldn't employ with other technologies. The other thing we want is to have these AI capabilities do things that we don't want to do, the drudgery, right? And it could be, automating sort of routine things. And then as we go to the right, we start seeing things like generative capabilities. And of course, everybody's been really captivated by, generative AI and chatbots. And it's really cool technology. It has a lot of capabilities. It has limitations as well. But there are some things, once again, superhuman things. For instance, recently, I had this huge list of text that needed to be classified and categorized. And yeah, I could have done it, but it would have taken me many hours to do that myself. Well, I was able to use generative AI to go through and classify and categorize all of this text into a really neat list of things that was, really, really helpful. So I was able to do more, much more quickly than I could have done by myself. So let's go to the next slide and talk about Gen AI a little bit. And generative AI, what's really cool about generative AI is the fact that everybody has access to it. It's highly accessible in nature. We've probably all played with it a bit. And you can see that, most folks have at least experimented with it. If we can go to the next slide and just take a look at that, thanks. So you can see that 37% are actually experimenting with it. And you can see some of the use cases. Most folks just want greater productivity and greater efficiency. And that's really what it does for us. It's not going to replace people, but it will allow us to do more quickly than we could do otherwise. And there are limitations to it, certainly. A lot of the vendors that are, not a lot of them, but a number of them, are finding ways to work around some of the limitations associated with generative AI. So you've heard about things like hallucinations, and that's real, certainly, but there are workarounds. And at the same time, the technology is becoming more sophisticated over time. And so you heard Porter talk about things like natural language. Natural language has been around for a while too. The challenge with natural language is that it required a lot of maintenance. There was syntax associated with it. With generative AI, there is less so. So if we look at the next slide, then my final slide, and talk about sort of the evolution of going from traditional natural language analytics techniques to generative AI, where you can, in free form, because generative AI has an understanding, well, not an understanding, right? It has a facility with language, and any language, by the way. Folks use it for coding, for instance. There are a lot of things you can do with generative AI, but you can ask it questions. For instance, with our chatbot that we use for our research, you can ask it questions, and it can much more readily point you to the resources than if you were to do a keyword search or a full text search. And that's true with business intelligence as well, being able to ask questions and have the generative AI chatbot generate the SQL, for instance, or be able to leverage the metadata and have that engine generate the data manipulation language and present it back to you. So we see that as sort of the evolution. It's another one of those things, one of those tools that we can use, another user paradigm, which helps us start to deliver on this notion of information democracy and also digital enterprise and becoming more hyper decisive. So next slide. In conclusion, information democracy, been talking about it for 31 years. Super important. It's a great way for us, and it's a goal for us to have to deliver this notion of timely, relevant, actionable insights to our users, to deeply penetrate the users, constituency, and stakeholders. Cloud, super important because it drops the cost. It makes access to those insights much more readily available, makes it easier to deliver much more broadly. Self-service, that's a great way to increase data literacy, as I talked about, to deliver, once again, this notion of business intelligence in a manageable environment where we can create and share and have a consistent environment. And then embedded lets us get to those users that live in other applications and have them engage in BI and data-driven insights without realizing that they're engaging in business intelligence at all. And ultimately, this notion of digital enterprise and becoming hyper-decisive, that's really important for enterprises, right? I think that it's going to be, survival. You have to do that in the future. You have to become a digital enterprise. You have to become hyper decisive. And we have to use all of our available tools, including things like artificial intelligence and generative AI, as a way to ultimately get to that end goal of becoming hyper decisive. So on that note, thanks for your time and attention. I really do appreciate it. And I will turn it back over to our hosts.
Great. Thank you so much, Howard. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed getting to see all of the insight that you're bringing. Porter, do you want to address a couple of those comments that you made in the chat for everyone?
Yeah, so the question's been coming in. Appreciate those. Definitely keep them coming in now that we're concluded. If there's anything you would like us to answer live, we can do it live. We had a couple questions. One is, about Reportcaster kind of viewing the entire schedule. I'm going to look into that, but everyone should be aware that there is a dedicated Reportcaster session coming up in June. So look for that invitation and that registration, and that'll have all of the product managers on it live. And we'll go into more detail, but we will be looking into that for you, Eric. Josh had a good one, about binding controls to prompts. Because I experienced this myself using Application Studio in proof of concepts, right? Like any customer that is creating procedures at the code level, in Application Studio, they had this nice way where you could bring it in and then you could actually bind a parameter to a control. And so we certainly acknowledge that is in order to leverage code-based procedures, or quite frankly, just anything created that has variables in it. That'd be a very useful capability in the designer that would allow you to leverage and reuse code-based procedures, but give it the more modern look and feel. So Josh will be looking into that for you as well. One thing, when I have Howard on the line, I'm always I'm going to get a little greedy here. I've got a couple of questions that I think might be of interest to the panel as well. One of them is, when I started for years, it was kind of like you're working with people, right, at customers. And some of the key kind of personas and analytics that we would deal with, right, like report developers, application developers, absolutely, as you would see Power BI or Tableau gain popularity and disrupt the market, kind of this business analyst type of person, someone maybe that is more out of the line of business, came into view. And we've always viewed, as a key persona for ourselves as non-technical consumers, a wide variety of non-technical consumers, someone receiving an investment statement, a police officer looking at a map, where should I go police? Like there's so many different types of these personas. One thing that we've seen with disruption around modern BI, now things like DSML and Gen AI, it became apparent to me a lot when we got acquired by Tibco and I started working with Spotfire teams and I started looking at the streaming data, which is, we believe that there is an evolution of personas within data and analytics. I was interviewed by, someone writing an article about how that's changing. I'd be curious what Howard is seeing in the market and with his customers on how kind of these common data and analytics personas are changing or evolving, or if new ones are coming up.
So I do think, yeah, you're right. The notion of the business analyst has been around for quite some time, and that's great. We love people, getting their hands on data. The problem is that you have a lot of fragmentation. So you've got marketing doing their thing and sales doing their thing and HR doing their thing. But some of the overarching trends is that, there are more people that are accessing data than ever before. We also have the emergence of things like a data science group. And those folks are, creating more sophisticated models, and those are getting pushed down through the organization through more traditional tools. So you have enrichment going on there. But I think overall, you have more and more people that have an understanding of the data. In terms of actual roles, I like to see more of a, maybe not a centralized group, but more of a center of excellence approach, where those folks are actually responsible for sort of the care and feeding and the education and support that are not necessarily IT. Sometimes it's IT, but not necessarily IT, where those folks are really the folks that are responsible for establishing best practice, documenting best practice, promoting best practice, supporting the users that are out there, and increasing the access to these applications in a way in which the users themselves can do it, but also in a consistent way. So once again, it's great that we have, these various analysts that are out there doing this, bringing in a variety of tools, but we also have to look at it from an enterprise perspective. So if everybody has a different perspective on the data and different semantics for the data, if you ask the same question to 5 people and you get 5 different answers, you've got a problem as an enterprise, and senior management can't easily discern what's going on. And so you end up going into these meetings and, you have different perspectives, and we need to have more of an enterprise perspective on this. We need to have more of a governed approach to this so that we all have similar answers, if not the same answer to the same question across the enterprise.
Thanks, Howard. And then I've got one more. It's our customers. We see this a lot when customers come up on renewal. There's kind of this evaluation of, have we invested in the right solution? Do we want to go forward with this solution? And one thing that comes up for us a lot, we obviously believe in the value of the solution. This goes for any solution that any vendor that an organization would invest in, whether it's us or Power BI or Helios or anyone, which is, what have you seen for customers that are invested in an enterprise reporting or business intelligence solution, the ones that have been most successful in using it? What are they doing? How have they set it up, whether it be their teams or alignment between IT and business? Like, what are some of those high level things that you see are common across customers that have been most successful in driving value from their investment?
Yeah, I think that it's less the technology. You need to have a great technology. Don't get me wrong. The technology's got to be functional. It's got to be performant. You also have to have a vendor organization that's really good at supporting their customers and being responsive to their customers. But I think that it really starts, in most cases, at the highest levels of management, where the C-levels actually understand the value of delivering data-driven insights, and they actually use it themselves. It's actually core to their success. So they're deeply involved. And I've seen this, in fact, in my second book, Profiles of Performance. I documented some of these where the C-level was really actively engaged, and life's a push-down stack. If the CEO thinks this is important and they're using it themselves, people will see the value and they'll start to leverage it. Now, there are other ways, in organizations, you can see this sort of activity sort of bubble up from the bottom. But for it to be really successful at a strategic level, you need to have the most senior levels of management seeing the value personally, as well as at an organizational level. And that's when you can see magic start to happen.
Sounds great. And I was expecting something along those lines. We certainly see alignment, at the highest levels or within the business and IT at our customers that are most successful as well. I think, the last question I would have is, we know that, many of our customers and many of the people that attend these sessions, right, are people that have their hands in the data and on the tool. They're working with data, they're modeling metadata, they're transforming it, they're writing procedures to create enterprise reports and dashboards. And so for these people, that continue to use our solution, any advice to them on technologies or things that you see being important to those type of people in the next, 2 to 5 years?
My advice to them is actually at least twofold. I'd do more if we had more time, right? But first of all, technology aside, go out there and find opportunities to support your users. Right? Find new opportunities to support your users. Go out there and meet with them regularly and say, hey, here's a new thing that you could do that you didn't think of before, to really help them be more effective in their role and be more successful in their role. Technologically, just like you look to information builders to future-proof the solution, all right, you folks need to be the experts as well. They're going to ask you, what are we doing with artificial intelligence? And you need to be knowledgeable enough, at least at some level, to say, here's where we're using it. Here are the appropriate use cases. Here are the policies that we're going to put in place for this advanced technology. And you know what? This is the technology we're talking about today. A year from now, we'll be talking about a new set of technologies. So you need to educate yourself, be conversant in it, so that you can communicate that to the rest of the organization.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
I was going to say, thank you so much, Howard. That was great. I do think that we are officially at time, but I wanted to, again, thank our wonderful panelists today. Howard, thank you. Porter, thank you. This was great. I really enjoyed it. And I hope all of you did as well. As a reminder, you will get a link to a survey whenever you exit this session. And you can expect to get a copy of this on demand in your inboxes, hopefully early next week. So With that, I'm going to go ahead and close, but thank you all so much for joining today, and we look forward to talking more. Always a pleasure, Howard.
Thank you.
Bye.